A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. So, I was looking at my shelf the other day, staring at a dusty stack of plastic boxes, and it hit me. We were told physical media was dead a decade ago, yet here we are in April 2026, and the 4K Blu-ray market actually grew last year. Today's prompt from Daniel hits on exactly why that is. He's asking about the technical and business tug-of-war between high-fidelity home cinema and the limitations of streaming.
It is a classic engineering trade-off, Corn. You have the convenience versus quality triangle, and for the longest time you could only pick two. It is the ultimate audiophile's dilemma, Corn. And honestly, it is a fascinating engineering problem because it is not just about bandwidth anymore. We have fiber to the home, we have Wi-Fi 7, the pipes are mostly big enough.
Usually, when I ask Herman what he did over the weekend, he says research, and I assume he means he looked at a Wikipedia page. This time, I think he actually tried to count the individual bits in the Dolby True HD stream. Also, fun fact for everyone listening, Google Gemini 3 Flash is writing our script today, which explains why the dialogue is so much more sophisticated than our usual banter.
Speak for yourself, Corn. I like to think my natural donkey-brained intellect is plenty sophisticated, but Daniel really hit on something here. The death of the physical disc has been predicted for 20 years, yet here we are in mid-2026, and 4K Blu-ray is still the gold standard. Why? Because streaming is, quite frankly, a compromise. A massive gap is an understatement. It is more like a canyon. If you look at a standard 4K stream from a major provider, you are topping out at maybe 15 to 25 megabits per second.
Which sounds like a lot until you realize a 4K Blu-ray is pushing 70 to 100 megabits per second. It is like trying to wash a car with a squirt gun versus a fire hose. You might get the dirt off eventually with the squirt gun, but the fire hose is doing a much more thorough job in real time.
That is actually a rare, decent analogy from you. That's exactly it. That crawling is noise caused by the encoder trying to save space. In a dark scene, the encoder assumes you won't notice if it groups similar dark pixels together. But on a high-end OLED, you see every single one of those macro blocks. It's like looking at a beautiful painting through a screen door. On a disc, the encoder has the bitrate budget to describe every subtle shade of charcoal and obsidian.
Okay, so 5 times the data. But to the average person, does that actually manifest as something you can see? Or is this just Herman Poppleberry being a spec sheet snob?
Hey, I resemble that remark, but seriously, it is most visible in the torture tests of video encoding. Think about a scene with heavy rain, or a dark room with a single flickering candle, or a massive explosion with thousands of tiny particles.
Right, because everyone focuses on the pixels, but the ears are much harder to fool. If I am watching an action movie, I want the explosion to feel like it is happening in my living room, not like someone popped a paper bag 3 houses down.
Precisely. The point is, streaming audio is almost always lossy. Most services use Dolby Digital Plus, which is a highly compressed format. That's a lack of bit depth and bit rate working together. A 4K Blu-ray uses a 10-bit color space with enough data to ensure those transitions are seamless. On a high-bitrate disc, those gradients are buttery smooth because the encoder didn't have to throw away data to fit through the pipe. It's the difference between a high-resolution photograph and a photocopied version of that photograph.
And it's not just the eyes, right? Daniel mentioned high-fidelity audio. I feel like the ears actually get the shorter end of the stick in the streaming world.
You hit the nail on the head. This is the part that drives home cinema enthusiasts crazy. Almost every streaming service uses lossy audio. They use Dolby Digital Plus, which is a compressed format. It sounds fine on a soundbar, sure. But if you have a dedicated 7.1.4 Atmos setup with high-end speakers, you can hear the lack of dynamic range.
Wait, explain dynamic range for the non-audiophiles. Is that just volume? Because a raw studio master of a movie is, what, a few hundred gigabytes?
A Blu-ray gives you Dolby True HD or DTS HD master audio. That is, lossless. It is bit for bit identical to the studio master. When an explosion happens on a disc, it has transient response. That immediate, sharp physical impact that streaming just rounds off to save space. It's the difference between a real drum hit and a recording of a drum hit played through a phone. Have you looked into what companies like Kaleidoscape are doing lately?
I have seen the price tags, Herman. It costs more than my car. It is basically the I have a dedicated room with tiered seating solution. But how does it actually work? Is it just a very expensive hard drive?
The assets are encrypted and tied to your account's executable. But a movie? Once you unlock the video frames to show them on a screen, they are just pixels. You aren't hitting play and hoping your neighbor doesn't start a massive download that throttles your bandwidth. The system downloads the entire file, often a higher bitrate than the Blu-ray itself, to a local, encrypted internal array.
So it is. Store and play. I buy the movie Friday morning. It spends all day sucking down 100 gigabytes of data, and by Friday night it is sitting there locally. No buffering, no bitrate drops, just pure, unadulterated data.
With a movie, once those frames are decrypted for display, they are just images. If a pirate can get to the point in the hardware where the video is clear, they can just rip it. Hollywood views a bit-for-bit master file as the crown jewels. If a perfect digital copy of a movie hits a torrent site on release day, they believe it nukes their entire revenue model.
But how much better is it, really? So we are stuck in this middle ground where the tech exists to give us the quality, but the lawyers won't let the engineers ship it. Is there any middle way that has actually worked?
Oh, it's measurable. These servers often get the mezzanine files from the studios. That's the step right below the master. We're talking bit rates that can peak at 150 megabits per second. That's nearly double what a disk can handle. There are a few, and they are basically divided into expensive hardware silos and very specific ecosystem locks. The most famous one for the 1% of home cinema is Kaleidoscape. Have you ever seen their gear?
I've heard of it. It's the thing that costs as much as a used car, right?
Precisely. A Kaleidoscape system starts at around $5,000 and goes way up from there. But here is how they solve Daniel's paradox. They don't stream. When you buy a movie on their store, the system downloads the full, uncompressed studio master to a local, heavily encrypted hard drive array. We are talking bit rates that sometimes exceed even the Blu-ray spec because they aren't limited by the physical spin speed of a disc.
So it's a store and play model. But how does that satisfy the studios? Why do they trust Kaleidoscape with the files, but not, say, a high-end PC user? If a service promises me high fidelity, but it dips every time my neighbor uses their microwave, I'm going back to the disc. Or at least, I would if I could find a store that still sold them.
The studios have a direct relationship with them because the customer base is small, wealthy, and unlikely to be running a pirate server from their multi-million-dollar home theater. It is security through exclusivity. They've essentially bought their way into the inner circle of trust. Packets get dropped, latency spikes. If you are streaming, the player has to make a choice, pause and buffer, or drop the quality. Most services choose to drop the quality because users hate buffering more than they hate slightly muffled audio.
I'm the opposite. I'd rather wait 30 seconds for the buffer if it means the audio doesn't sound like it's coming through a tin can. But I know I am in the minority. Most people are watching movies on their phones or tablets anyway.
If you have a high-end Sony TV or a PlayStation 5, you can access what they call Pure Stream. It hits up to 80 megabits per second. That is basically Blu-ray quality over the wire. They don't realize they are missing half the detail in the shadows or the full resonance of the orchestral score. But for the home cinema enthusiast, that gap is a chasm.
So, we have the store and play server for the wealthy, and we have Pure Stream for the people with high-end Sony TVs and elite internet. Is there a third way? What about decentralized storage or something like a secure container on a standard PC?
They are still using DTS or compressed Atmos because the overhead of lossless audio streaming is still a nightmare for sync and jitter. That is why you can't even stream Netflix in 4K on many PC setups. The DRM requirements are so strict that if you don't have the right HDCP compliant chain from the GPU to the monitor, it defaults to 1080p or even 720p.
It is almost like the studios are punishing the people who care the most about quality. Oh, you want the best version? Great. Please buy this $3,000 proprietary box that only plays our movies.
If the audio packets arrive slightly out of sync with the video due to network jitter, you get pops or dropouts. In a streaming environment, it's much safer to use a constant bitrate compressed track that the hardware can buffer easily. It's frustrating, but it's a stability-first approach. Imagine a subscription where your set-top box, maybe a future version of an Apple TV or a Shield, has a 2 terabyte internal drive. When you rent a movie, it doesn't let you watch it instantly. It says, your high-fidelity copy will be ready in 40 minutes.
I actually love that. It brings back the anticipation of going to the video store. You pick your movie, you go make the popcorn, you dim the lights, and by the time you're ready, the data is all there, sitting locally, ready to blast your eardrums with lossless audio. It solves the bandwidth problem, and, if the box is secure, it solves the piracy problem.
But would you actually wait? That's the psychological hurdle. If you're sitting there with your date and you have to wait 40 minutes for the Ultra version to download, wouldn't you just click the standard button and start watching immediately?
I think it depends on the movie. If it's the new Christopher Nolan film, I'm waiting. I want the full experience. If it's a romantic comedy where two people just talk in a brightly lit kitchen, maybe I stay in the muddy puddle. But having the option is what's missing right now.
They are super consumers. They aren't looking to steal, they are looking to curate. But it requires a shift in consumer behavior. We have been trained for instant gratification. If I click a button, I want the movie to start in 3 seconds.
Then Tidal came along. Then Apple Music and Amazon started offering lossless and high-res. Now it's just a standard feature. Why can't I just pay an extra $10 a month to Netflix for the master tier? Especially for a movie night event.
The cost for a company like Netflix to serve that much data over their Content Delivery Network, or CDN, is astronomical. In music, the bandwidth is cheap enough that the lossless badge is a great marketing tool with low overhead. In video, that master tier would actually eat into their margins significantly.
But surely they could charge $40 a month for it. There has to be a segment of the market that would pay. If you're going to spend $5,000 on a surround sound system, why would you feed it a low bitrate diet? It is like buying a Ferrari and putting the cheapest possible gas in it.
I'm paying $40 and it keeps buffering. For Netflix, the brand damage of a premium service that feels broken to the average user isn't worth the extra revenue from the few thousand nerds who actually have the gear to enjoy it. You can make a 20 megabit stream look shockingly good, but audio hasn't had that same leap in compression efficiency because lossless is, by definition, the end of the road. You can't compress lossless further without it becoming lossy.
It's because the hardware doesn't have the specific DRM level, like Widevine L1, required by the studios. If you increase the bitrate and the quality, the security requirements only get stricter.
You're right. To play an 80 megabit stream, your device needs a very powerful decoder chip and a secure path to the screen. Most cheap streaming sticks would literally melt trying to process that much encrypted data in real time. The heat generation alone from an ARM processor trying to chew through a 100 megabit HEVC stream is non-trivial. So, the solution Daniel is looking for is currently bifurcated. If you want the quality and the convenience, you pay the hardware tax for a system like Kaleidoscape or Sony's ecosystem. If you want the quality but don't have the cash, you stay with physical discs.
Let's talk about the future, though. Is there a codec that saves the day? I keep hearing about AV1. Is that going to bridge the gap? Netflix Ultra, where the app pre-downloads the next 3 movies on your must-watch list in the background at 100 megabits per second.
But here is the thing. Efficiency is usually used by corporations to save money, not to give you more quality. Instead of giving us a 60 megabit AV1 stream that looks like a Blu-ray, they will give us a 10 megabit AV1 stream that looks good enough and save millions on their bandwidth bill.
That is the most cynical and probably most accurate thing you've said all day. It's the Jevons paradox of data. As it becomes cheaper to send data, we don't necessarily get higher quality. We just get more of the same quality for less cost to the provider.
Precisely. It's like how cars became more fuel efficient, but instead of just saving gas, we made the cars bigger and heavier. But there is a glimmer of hope in the download to own space. Apple TV is actually surprisingly good here. If you buy a movie on iTunes, the bitrate is often significantly higher than a standard Netflix stream, peaking around 30 or 40 megabits. And because the Apple TV hardware is quite powerful, it handles the decryption smoothly.
Which is why the boutique physical media market is so resilient. It is the only way to truly decouple from the servers. I wonder if there's a world where we use something like blockchain or zero-knowledge proofs for DRM. Daniel's into AI and automation. He probably thinks about this.
And you use hardware-level encryption to keep the lawyers happy. It is a solved problem technically, but it's a market problem because the infrastructure, the servers, the high-capacity storage, the high-speed internal networks is still expensive. That is the dream. A decentralized DRM where the ownership is on a ledger and the playback is local. The problem is getting Disney, Warner Brothers, and Sony to agree on a single standard. They can barely agree on which HDR format to use.
Dang it, I said it. I mean, you're right. The storage is cheap. The bandwidth is getting there. The only thing missing is the studio's willingness to let go of the instant play metric as the only way to measure success.
They love that time to play metric. They want you to click and see a picture in under 2 seconds. They think if you have to wait, you'll go do something else. But for the high-end home cinema user Daniel mentioned, the wait is part of the ritual.
It is like decanting a fine wine. You don't just chug it out of the bottle, you let it breathe. You let the bits settle into the hard drive. You let the electrons get comfortable.
It has dedicated processors for chroma upsampling that make even a standard stream look better, but more importantly, it lets you actually use the hardware you paid for. If you've spent $3,000 on speakers, giving them a compressed Netflix stream is like putting low-octane gas in a Ferrari.
Is there a specific movie you use to test this? Like, if I want to see the difference today, what should I put in?
Blade Runner 2049's. Hands down. The opening scene with the white foggy landscape will show you every bit of compression noise on a stream, but on the 4K disc, it's a solid, thick atmosphere that feels tangible, or Dunkirk for the audio. The way those planes scream overhead in lossless DTS HD is terrifying. You don't get that sheer in the sound on a standard stream.
I like that. It's about matching the source to the output. It's wild that in 2026, the most technologically advanced way to watch a movie is still a physical disc that was invented decades ago. It's like vinyl for people who like explosions.
It really is. And the boutique labels are leaning into this. Companies like Criterion or Second Sight are releasing these incredible limited editions with high bitrate transfers and every audio format imaginable. They know their audience. They aren't selling to the person watching The Office on their phone during a commute. They are selling to the person who wants to be transported.
Let's look at the piracy side of Daniel's question for a second. Is the fear of piracy even a valid excuse anymore? I mean, every movie is available on pirate sites within hours of release anyway. Usually, those are web rips or web DLS from streaming sites. So, the current DRM isn't even stopping the pirates. It's only stopping the legitimate users from getting high quality.
That is the DRM paradox. It almost always punishes the paying customer more than the pirate. If you're a pirate, you have a clean, DRM-free file that plays on any device. If you're a paying customer, you're locked into a specific app on a specific TV with a bitrate cap. It is a backwards incentive structure.
Just like our family dinners. But seriously, this is a great look at why physical isn't just about the object, it's about the data pipe. And until the digital pipe is as wide as a laser reading a disk, we're going to need these store-and-play workarounds.
I think we've given Daniel a lot to chew on. It's not about if it can be done, it's about the industry's willingness to prioritize the 5% of users who can actually tell the difference. But as high-end home audio gear becomes more affordable, that 5% is growing. People are realizing that 4K on the box doesn't always mean 4K on the screen.
Or Atmos in the ears. I want my floor to shake, Herman. If my floor isn't shaking, I'm not watching a movie, I'm watching a very long YouTube video.
But for the enthusiasts, the people Daniel is talking about, the gap is actually getting wider. As we move toward 8K displays and even more complex audio like 32-channel spatial sound, the bandwidth requirements are going to explode.
Thanks as always to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping the bits in the right order, and a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the show. They're the reason we can have these high bitrate conversations.
This has been My Weird Props. If you enjoyed our deep dive into the guts of home cinema, we're on Spotify if you haven't followed us there yet. And honestly, I think that's okay. As long as there is a market for it, companies will keep making the high-end gear. We might see a world where a movie isn't a stream, but a temporary high-speed cache on your TV.
I'm off to see if I can download a pizza. It's the ultimate store and play model.
That's just called ordering a pizza, corn. Goodbye, everyone.
Wait, that was 2 lines. End cleanly. Bye. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts.